Just off the west coast of Scotland in the Outer Hebrides is a little-known cluster of islands called the Shiants. The name means haunted or enchanted. And while the last people left over a century ago, every summer these deserted shores become the stage for an extraordinary show. Great waves of seabirds return here from far out in the Atlantic, coming back to mate and breed. For many of us, the seabird is a noisy scavenger, gulls that plague our seafronts. But these annual visitors to the Shiants are altogether more mysterious and surprising. The unmistakably gaudy puffin, the sleek and stylish razorbill, the chocolatey elegance of the guillemot, and the prehistoric fearsome shag. I'm Adam Nicolson, a writer, and for summer after summer I've been able to witness this great spectacle, ever since my father first brought me here as a boy 50 years ago. The more you get to know about these birds, the more extraordinary they are. Any idea that somehow we have a monopoly on ingenuity or resilience or persistence in the face of difficulty absolutely goes out of the window. But now, despite this resilience, throughout the North Atlantic, seabirds are in steep decline. In Scotland, 40% have already been lost.
This is a photo taken back in the 80s of this exact same cliff, full of birds.
And now there are literally 3 or 4. That's incredible. And in Iceland, traditionally a seabird stronghold, the crisis has hit even harder, with some colonies all but wiped out.
In some cases we come to a colony which all the chicks died within framework of a few days. 130,000 some dead chicks everywhere.
So what is going on? Could all this pulsating life be coming to an end? Are we really facing the last of our great seabird summers? So far, I've spent the last few months on the Shiants following the progress of the birds. It's puffins. They're all puffins in that. It's phenomenal, this annual re-emergence of life like this. I've begun to look at how man's relationship with the seabird has changed, how they were once a valuable source of food.
We used to be cormorant soup at one time.
Puffins were a very delicacy then.
They were quite tasty, yeah.
And how they were slaughtered in their thousands for feathers to make hats, even driving one bird to extinction. They literally herded them into their ships. I've been exploring how our relationship in Britain has become one of conservation. Lovely guillemot, look at that, isn't that beautiful? But in Iceland, the seabird heartland, I found puffin hunting to be still very much part of everyday life. Well, look, there, if you like, is the Icelandic tradition made flesh. I've discovered that there are striking local variations in the crisis. In the far north of Iceland, there was kittiwake abundance like I'd never seen. That is a wonderful, wonderful sight. Just a sort of blizzard of sea life. And yet, less than 150 miles from the Shiants in Orkney, the RSPB's Phil Taylor explained how 90% of the kittiwakes had been lost.
There is apparently no food available for them to bring back to the chicks, let alone feed themselves. This patch of sea, lovely and blue though it looks to you and I, obviously isn't in particularly good condition.
But whatever is happening to our seas, so far at least, the Shiants appear to have escaped. This is as good as I've ever seen here. As I continue to follow the story of the birds on the Shiants, I'm going to investigate the forces driving the crisis elsewhere. It's now early July, the most critical part of the bird's year. I'm on my way to the island's main seabird colony, the best place on the Shiants to get a snapshot of how the birds are doing. By now the chicks will be hatched and demanding food.
It's not only the survival of the adult birds that matters, it's how good the feeding of the young ones are. Because it's what happens now which governs what happens in their first crucial winter. They've got to be fed well now. And if they're not fed well now, they will die over the winter.
This landscape of fallen boulders and towering cliffs might seem forbidding to us, but it's actually perfect for the birds. The chicks will all be hidden safely out of sight, the puffins in their burrows on the grassy slopes, and the razorbills and guillemots concealed in the nooks and crannies between the rocks. And even though I can't yet see the chicks, I can certainly hear them.
There's a razorbill just arrived, its mouth just stuffed with fish. Completely delicious looking sand eels. Exactly the kind of fish that their chicks need. And down into its hole. They look like these fantastic silvered moustaches. A great big drooping walrus moustache of fish. You know, that is the goodness of the ocean. I mean, that's everything good out there being delivered to the chicks in here.
A plentiful supply of fish is essential because the chicks have voracious appetites. This view from inside the burrow, filmed on the Shiants, shows what the adult bird is up against. Each chick or puffling has to be fed up to 5 or 6 times a day and will eat about 2.5 kilos of fish in the month before it's ready to leave the burrow.
There's a family of guillemots there with a little chick, very downy still. Incredibly loyal husband and wives. You know, guillemot marriages, 90% of them last from year to year. And they do this kind of creche thing, you know. It's not only the parents of the guillemots that look after the chick. There could easily be a load of sisters, brothers and sisters in there. To see this here now means, for the time being here, for this summer, it looks as if the supply is good. But it's perfectly clear that these birds here won't go on being here unless that sea provides what they need, you know, provides the fish that you can see them all bringing in here this morning.
It's a relief to be surrounded by birds on the Shiants, because in Iceland, some colonies have suffered dramatic collapse. While I was there, I left the abundance of the north of the country and travelled to the worst-hit colonies in the south. The Westman Islands, an archipelago off Iceland's southwest coast, have been home to the world's largest puffin populations. The Westman Islands has been this incredible place for seabirds forever. But in the last 10 years, they've had really catastrophic breeding failures. So something truly disastrous is happening here. The main island, Jaime, was hit by a massive volcanic eruption in 1973. But luckily the harbour survived and is still the biggest fishing port on Iceland's south coast. But if industry on the Westmans is all about cod, then the culture here is resolutely about the puffin. The focus of the tourist trade, puffins are also at the heart of an ancient hunting tradition. Before the puffin declines began, Westman Islanders were catching more than 100,000 a year for food and feathers, from a total population of around 2 million birds.
We have been utilizing seabirds ever since the settlement of this country 1100 years ago. And the reason being is that these birds, they have been really important to the sustenance of the people in the past, but it's still a part of the culture, quite strong part of the culture, especially in certain places.
These nets, called flags, originated in the Faroe Islands and are still in use by hunters today. As well as eating the birds, another valuable part of the Icelanders' diet has always been seabird eggs, particularly razorbill and guillemot.
Most of the bird cliffs were descended in a rope, very dangerous business. Going down 100 meters, 200 meters to collect the eggs. You needed a big long rope, and that was expensive. It was only the richer people that were able to do that. So they were more or less controlling how much was being taken.
Today, with the birds declining, the question of hunting sustainably seems more important than ever.
I think in general, people think this should be a sustainable resource, but we should continue to be allowed to harvest. Going out in an island, watching the behavior of the birds, living among them even in many cases. People get to know a lot about these birds.
It's this first-hand knowledge I want to tap into. I've already encountered puffin hunting in the far north of the country, where the birds were abundant. But I want to spend time with hunters here in the south, who've come face to face with the puffin declines.
How long ago was it you first went out to Elsey?
50 years ago.
50, so we got the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
How old were you then when you first went?
5 years old.
I'm spending a couple of days with them, and I'm hoping they'll have some ideas about what's behind the crisis and what the future might hold for the birds.
I used to be a fisherman.
Are you a millionaire now?
No.
There's a wonderful, otherworldly feel about this place, not unlike the Shiants. On the larger islands of the archipelago, the puffin hunters have organised themselves into long-established clubs.
Well, that's Elsey there, that's their island. The island we're going to. How far from here? About 4 miles?
2.5.
2.5 miles. So how many times have you been there all of you?
If you count every time, a few hundred.
A few hundred, all
Yeah,
of you?
if you've been there for 20 years, you go maybe 4 or 5 times for each year.
So you've been 100, you've been 5,000.
As we get closer to Alsay, and it becomes clear that there are no birds, the atmosphere changes.
When you were last here, were there many puffins here then?
No, not many.
No,
Even in the evening when they came in?
No, not many. It is, I think this summer we have never seen as few puffins as this summer.
Is that right? 14, 15 years ago, what would it look like when you arrived?
When you came here, it was completely white here. You could, of course, it's green grass, but it looks more white than green.
White with their white chest?
Yeah, white chest. And on the sea was black because it was a black back. So it was everywhere birds, everywhere puffins, on the sea, on the island, everywhere.
You could hardly believe it today.
No.
There might be no sign of any puffins on Alsay, but the skies above the neighbouring island were alive with birds. Gannets. Much bigger than puffins, gannets are capable of surviving on a wide range of fish.
It's like a whole ballroom of gannets. They're just circling now. Gannets are doing really well, right next to the puffins that are doing really badly.
yeah.
Why is that?
Mackerel. When the mackerel comes over, he get all the sandy. So it's nothing left for the puffin.
Because the mackerel are here, the gannet are doing well, and because the mackerel are here, the puffins are doing badly.
Yeah.
But that's a single cause, and maybe there are more causes.
Yeah, of course. The reason why the mackerel is here is warmer ocean. It is like everything in nature is a circle. Mm-hmm. And the circle, when the mackerel goes away, the puffin comes up again, and then it goes down.
I hadn't expected to hear the blame for the crisis put on an influx of mackerel. But as we approach the island, my immediate concern is how we get ashore. It looks quite difficult.
It can be.
Say when. There's been a hunter's lodge on this site for over 100 years. And from its humble origins, it's evolved into something really impressive. The men sometimes stay here for a couple of weeks and have even installed an ingenious pulley system for getting the supplies onto land. You know, you'd have to be mad not to love this, wouldn't you? I mean, this is like the ideal life. I could live here. Just tie out the rib down there. Feels deeply connected to the way people have done this for a very long time here. You know, people have lived on these islands for 1,000 years. And you can know from the very beginning that they would have come to these islands. This, you know, 500,000, 700,000 puffins, and they would have been here taking them. And you can connect this, you can feel it. Well, the way of life isn't lost here. As the rib goes back to Jaime to pick up more club members, I'm struck by the extraordinary beauty of this place. But when Didi produces his net, it's a reminder that everything here revolves around the hunt for puffins.
There was an old puffin hunter from this island.
Yeah.
He made this for me.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Obviously it's exciting and lovely and deeply pleasurable, but it's also kind of terrible.
No, you just like other hunters, you get used to it. So
Yeah.
they who are hunting other animals, they get used to hunt them.
Yeah. Well, do you think you'll catch some tonight? I mean, they're flying here, aren't they?
I think that we will catch some.
The boat returns with more hunters. The club president and his son, Gulli. Hello. For generations, their family has been deeply rooted in the Icelandic puffin hunting tradition.
First of all, this was to keep, to get food to survive through the winter.
And when did that need for puffins last until?
Well, I remember my grandmother peeling the feathers off the birds to use it for pillows.
So what year?
And I was maybe 10 years old. Ever since 7 years old, I have been out here for every summer. Now, I have brought my sons, and he has brought his son, and so that's what we've been doing, trying to keep the tradition and the way how this is done. Because now, since we do not have a lot of puffin here, it's going to be lost.
In the past, when this colony was still at full strength, all the members of the club would have come out hunting.
I think the puffins will come over there and try to catch them, catch few of them.
How does it look to you in numbers and all that?
I think that we will catch some.
But with so few birds, it's just Didi to show me how it's done here.
Ready?
Yeah,
Come. Follow me.
Oh, God. Dusk is when puffins usually turn up in force.
It's long, the grass.
So making our way up these virtually empty slopes is a grim reminder that only 12 years ago, this island was still supporting hundreds of thousands of birds.
It's riddled with burrows.
Better to come here.
What an incredible place. Look at it. Puffins only love beautiful places, don't they?
Yeah, that's the way.
You never find it in an ugly spot.
It's so good to be here. It's so quiet and beautiful landscape.
Why do you have a flag?
Because the young birds, they are so curious. When they see the flag, they stick around, look at the flag, fly here very slowly, and then I try to catch them.
Nab them.
Yeah.
So where do we put it?
We put it, I always do this one here, and put it 2 or 3 meters higher than
Okay.
the stick. Okay.
I'll stick it in. Kind of here?
Yeah, oh, a little bit higher, a little bit higher. Yeah, there.
In here?
Yes.
If that flag, Didi, is to attract the immature birds, and the breeding has failed for 10, 13 years here,
Yeah.
are there any immatures to attract?
No, of course not. But this is the way we do it all the time. So I'm not going to change the way we do it.
It's pure tradition.
Yeah.
There are clearly a few puffins here, but the local government sets the length of the hunting season according to the abundance of birds.
Such a beautiful sight, seeing them coming towards you, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
This year, here in the crisis-hit south, it's been restricted to just 3 days.
Yay! Not long! Oh, growling away. So, can you tell his age?
I can tell this is not
Not a very old one.
not very old one.
He hasn't got
I can
many
see it because
grooves in it.
he's very light,
Yes.
and his nose is not so very big.
No.
But this is the first bird that I catch, so I speak to him a little bit.
Go on then.
And I say to him, give me a good luck of hunt this year,
I think
and I will give you a freedom.
he
Okay.
needs to hear that in Icelandic, that he doesn't talk English.
Gefðu mig góða við, þá ætla ég að sleppa þér núna og hafa það vel. Okay.
You lean forward like a dog. It's like looking like a spaniel. Eyes flicking everywhere. What have been your usual catches here?
In 2013, we only caught 100 I'd say that year.
And was that the worst year?
No, last year we didn't catch one.
You didn't catch a single puffin?
No.
Why not?
Because there weren't any.
Even on an evening like this,
Yeah.
they wouldn't come in?
No.
Wow.
And we know the situation isn't good, so we just let them fly and try to build up, you know. We know it will take 5 or 10 years to be same as it was at the best time. So we just have to wait, be patient, and just to have fun with my friends, see how beautiful this place is, and that gives me a lot of pleasure.
Didi is clearly convinced that the birds will return. I'm not so sure. I wonder if that's just the voice of hope. But for the moment it's clear that they're trying not to take too many birds.
I would say maybe 10, 20 max.
And that'll be the ceiling on it?
Yes.
And is
Just to have one dinner, traditional dinner, puffin dinner at home, bring the family together and say, okay, we'll do it once this year.
The next morning, I found photo albums that exhaustively documented their hunting history on Alsey.
The pictures of these men here, and as boys. And that's Guli. And that's his father, and that's his grandfather. Wow, look at that. That is thick. Incredible numbers, like midges. But then looking at that, that's not unlike a very good evening on the North Slope in the Shiants. It can feel that you're looking out through a field of puffins, and that's what it looks like there.
Looking at their photos, I was struck by how Gully and I both had childhoods intertwined in the life of these birds. But the relationship my father gave me with the Shiant puffins was completely different. Arm's length, detached. A pair of binoculars, not a flag net. Gully's relationship, on the other hand, was immediate, physical, and driven by centuries of Icelandic tradition.
But there is a mountain of puffins there,
Yes.
isn't there? Look at that. I mean, how many in there? Can you reckon how many?
100.
A few hundreds.
Maybe 2,000. They're not all visible, but that's probably 1,500, 2,000.
So a good day's work for you.
Good day, we say 200 to 500. It's a very, very good day.
For one catcher.
Yeah.
We kind of regret we can't go out and catch. That's really what we're missing.
But it must be, it's almost like the glue of the event missing, and the thing that binds
Yes.
it together
Yes.
is not here.
Yes, yes.
But you must miss that, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Surely.
You know.
Looking at these images, I'm reminded that less than 50 years ago, people in Scotland were still taking seabirds, even on the Shiants.
It is a sort of pan-Atlantic phenomenon, this. And the reason that it stopped in Scotland was that the mainstream culture didn't like it. Whereas the mainstream culture here celebrates this. This is somehow the heart of Iceland. You know, maybe what they're riding on here is the same memory of poverty that was there in the Hebrides too. And if you remember a time, even sort of half genetically remember a time when life was incredibly difficult and up against it, then this is a gift from nothing, isn't it? This is almost literally manna from heaven. And those kind of cultural memories are incredibly long-lasting, and they almost last beyond their justification. And I think that's what's happening here.
It is difficult to believe that taking so many puffins hasn't played a part in their decline. But the Elsey men do seem to try and hunt sustainably. They don't take any breeding bird, bringing fish in for its young. Even so, especially in the current situation, it seems crazy to take any puffins at all. Back on the Shiants, it was good to be surrounded by so many thousands of birds. But it's impossible to forget that the wider crisis among the seabirds might be coming here. Everything that you see and hear in Iceland, the really shocking levels of failure to breed there, hang just beyond that horizon as a threat here. That could what has happened there happen here? You know, could my life be the last life in which you can come to places like this and know that this is what you get to see? I mean, that is a live question. But there are things we can do. It's hoped that the Shiants could act as a sort of seed bank, exporting seabirds to other places. And to lift a significant burden from the colonies here and maximise their chances of survival, the RSPB have begun a major programme to eradicate the bird's only non-indigenous predator, the black rat. These alien invaders came ashore from ships wrecked on the Shiants in the 18th century. They prey on seabird eggs and chicks and prevent some species from nesting here at all. Costing nearly £1 million and taking over a year to complete, the project is led by Biz Bell.
So people say that to you quite often, Biz.
Are you the rat lady? Yes.
Yes, are you the rat lady? Yeah. What is it about rat? No, we'll have that conversation over there.
She's seen the impact of removing unwanted predators on islands all over the world.
I mean, the whole thing is usually your ecosystem's really suppressed. And so once that predator and competitor is gone, everything suddenly comes out.
That is so exciting.
I've been in Mauritius, and within 3 weeks, we had some lizards that we'd never seen before, and they hadn't been recorded for 5 years.
Really?
They thought they were extinct.
Fantastic.
And they were just small ones managing to survive in the crevices,
Yeah.
but any bigger when they couldn't live in the crevices, they got nobbled by rats.
There is one species it would be really exciting to have return to the Shants. The storm petrel, one of our most entrancing seabirds. Named after St. Peter, who walked on water. It's effortlessly at home out to sea, but on land, it's hopelessly vulnerable to predators like rats.
Storm petrels, they're tiny, mouse size, and live in little crevices. And so, of course, so do all the rats and things, and they're just easy prey. And the thing is they could be trying every year to establish here. But unfortunately, they're probably being predated by rats.
Yes.
Eventually, the rats will be killed using over 1,000 bait stations, each containing blocks of poison. It's going to be a tall order to get every last one, but Biz has a reputation as the best in the world. This bizarre sound is actually the cry of a storm petrel massively amplified. These speakers and nets have been set up by a team of bird ringers, here to monitor the seabird colonies. The idea is to try and encourage nearby storm petrels to investigate the Shants as a possible home.
Oh, there's one. Oh, there's one, here's one.
Yeah.
There's one in there,
The birds are caught so they can be ringed, recorded, and their movements tracked.
Well done, that seems free. So in the bag, just to keep it calm.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that. How lovely is that? Oh, what an exquisite thing. Look at that.
This tiny bird flies thousands of miles every year, from the seas off South Africa to breeding colonies in Britain and Ireland. The ringing team is led by Jim Lennon.
They always appear very delicate, but obviously very tough creatures that survive in the southern oceans.
I can't believe this animal travels so far.
2580-173.
Yeah.
Does it ever feel slightly wrong to you, this? Put something so human on something so wild?
No, because it doesn't affect the way they live, but it helps us understand how they live, and therefore we can help conserve them.
So you're going to wade?
Yes, yeah. Okay.
See, that's the weirdest environment it's ever been in.
Hopefully.
And what are you getting? 24.8 grams.
Yeah.
That's less than a bag of crisps.
Yeah.
This creature that travels the Atlantic and back.
That's right.
Once it's been ringed and fully documented, each bird is released apparently untraumatized by its ordeal.
So you put it on your palm now and let it take off when it feels like it.
On here?
It might take a while because there's not much breeze.
Okay, so it's sitting there. I can barely feel the presence. It's just shuffling, it's just moving, and it's gone.
Well, cool. I never tire of that.
Jim and his team went on to catch 23 storm petrels that night, suggesting there's plenty around to establish a new colony here. But if the storm petrels do return, they'll only stay if the seas around the Shants remain plentiful. As I saw for myself in Iceland, no colony can continue without the food to sustain it. Somehow these waters are still fertile enough to bring the birds back every summer. It may be to do with particular local conditions. Notoriously powerful tides here force the water over rough seabeds, stirring up nutrients that feed the plankton the sand eels depend on. I've always found these seas to be incredibly rich. Ever since I first started coming here with my father, it has seemed almost too easy to catch a fish. and that's still true today.
Well, you can catch pollock, very nice pollock, mackerel, coley. I caught a cod once, once in 50 years. Everything feeds on sand eels. Sand eels are like the rice of the ocean. They're just everywhere. And I've got a fish. That's ridiculous. There's fertility for you. Oh, that's pulling hard. Oh, Mr. Pollock. That is magnificent. Oh, yes. And it's triple hooked. You see, so hungry for the sand eels. Look at that. You see, isn't that a splendid creature? Look at what the ocean can give you here.
I've always assumed that, like me, the Shiant birds fish not far from the colonies. But until recently, exactly where seabirds feed has always been a mystery. An RSPB team has come to the Shiants to map the birds' fishing trips in these waters around the islands known as the Minch. Ecologist Emily Scragg is using GPS technology to track the birds.
Wow, it's so miniaturised, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's incredible. So what are you going to do with this?
We'll put on the tags onto the birds' backs, which will go out and collect data.
Incredibly light.
And when they come back, they transmit the data to these base stations. We can come and pick up the base station and look at the data.
So is that going to go on a razor bill?
Razor bill or a guillemot.
Yeah, lovely. Today?
Possibly. Hopefully.
They're coming to the end of a 6-week programme to fit trackers on about 50 guillemots and razor bills from all the main colonies. Emily catches her birds without the use of a net.
Oh, he's in a bag.
And to try and minimise their disturbance, insists on quiet while she works. Emily's colleague Jerry attaches the transmitter to the back of a razor bill.
This is like A&E. Okay, so there's the tag with its GPS tracker.
The tag will constantly record and store the bird's journeys, downloading the data to a base station every time it comes back to the nest.
Thumbs up,
Yay! The sticky tape and battery last about a week before the tracker falls off. With their programme complete and all the data collected, Emily and Jerry have built up a map that reveals for the first time the movements of the Shiant birds.
That's amazing. The entire Minch within 20k, 50 miles, something like that, is solid with seabird tracks. I mean, that
it's quite a rainbow with
oh my God, it's busy.
Each coloured line represents the journey of an individual bird looking for fish for its young.
What sort of average distance they're going?
It's between 5 miles and 10 miles.
Yeah.
On the shorter side of what seabirds tend to do.
Right.
Some of the razor bills and guillemots we've tracked off there have gone quite a distance, and the birds here have gone comparatively not very far.
These results are graphic confirmation that for now at least the local seas around the Shiants are providing what the birds need. But in the southwest of Iceland, this is clearly not the case. The decline of the puffin colonies means that their seas must be changing. Iceland's leading puffin expert, Erpur Hansen, took me to one of the worst hit puffin colonies in the Westman Islands, only a few miles from Alsay. He's been studying the connection between the state of the seas and what's happening to the birds.
In the 90s, this would be packed with birds on a good day, just like up in Scotland, but that's now history. This is the 13th year in a row we have seen a breeding failure of larger or greater extent, and so they were never born. And now we're only seeing the remains of the adult population slowly going down in numbers by the years.
This site is the site I dread.
Yeah.
It's very shocking to me to kind of feel the absence.
What I think is happening, the wintering grounds are, as far as we know, are okay. It's the local summer food supply which is the key problem.
On the Shiants, the GPS results had shown the birds foraging no more than 20 kilometres from the colony.
How far out are they fishing?
It's normally within 60 kilometers or so. They can be seen up to over 120, but these parents are burning half their body weight per day in energy. So chicks get less and less to eat the further away they fly, and this applies to all seabirds. But these guys are very high on maintenance. That's why they are a bit sensitive to changes in food supply.
Back at his house, Erpur explained some of the causes driving the changes in the ocean system.
We are very dependent on this major current here called the Irminger. It's an offshoot from the Gulf Stream. It's sort of like the key player, and the warming in the south and west, where the main population of puffins are, basically collapsed the sand eel in 2003. It really started.
So warmer current coming up to the southwest corner of Iceland has meant a drop in the sand eel population.
Yeah, we see this intensity or the increased flow of this current, meaning it's just warming everything up. That has huge impact on marine life. 1 degree Celsius, it causes a regime shift, as they call them.
What do you mean by that?
Total reorganization of the whole system. Some key species fall out, move, or vanish. So there's a lot of major change, which goes on for decades.
Erpur also showed me some research which added another dimension I was not expecting. This complicated-looking graph disguises a simple truth, that these temperature changes are part of a cycle. This is the third period of ocean warming in the last 100 years or so, and each time there's been a corresponding failure of the puffins to breed.
So the current one we're looking at is quite intense. There is no chick production. We're measuring the chick production here, and it's virtual zero. In 2020, it should reverse or start to cool again.
But if you add global warming on top of the natural oscillation anyway, that is a major uncertainty added to the system, isn't it?
That's the name of the game.
So the question seems to be, is this a natural oscillation or an irreversible man-made warming of the sea, or a bit of both? Are the Alsay puffin hunters right that we might be on the point of returning to cooler conditions? Looking for answers, I've come to the National Oceanographic Centre in Southampton to see one of the senior scientists, Penny Holliday, whose work focuses on the mechanics of the North Atlantic.
The waters south of Iceland are influenced by the deep ocean currents. So this whole region between the UK, Iceland, Greenland and Canada is the subpolar North Atlantic, and it has this large recirculating ocean current system that we call the subpolar gyre.
A giant swirls of 3,000 miles wide or something.
Yes, it's a massive swirling pot of ocean water that mixes up warm water from the subtropics that comes from the Gulf Stream and cold fresh water from the Arctic.
How come the sea around Iceland has changed apparently as radically as this? What's actually happened?
There is a boundary between the cold fresh water in the centre of the gyre and the warm salty water that's lying basically to the west of us in the UK.
Right.
But in the mid-1990s, there was quite a change in the shape and the circulation. That boundary moved westwards, and that allowed more subtropical water to flood this area west of the UK and basically to bathe this deep ocean south of Iceland with much warmer water. Some of that water also made its way onto the continental shelf around the UK, and so that'll be influencing the conditions in the Western Isles and also in the Orkneys.
I wondered what Penny thought the future might hold.
It's difficult to untangle the signal of global warming and the signal of these natural variations in the North Atlantic. But at the moment, our models do predict that this whole area will cool again over the next 5 to 10 years. So the Icelanders might be right. the whole area might start to cool in the next few years.
And can you say it will go back to being as cool as it was?
No, I don't. I wouldn't be confident of saying that at all.
Whatever the impact of climate change may be on natural cooling, there's no doubt that warmer seas are disastrous for the birds. To find out why, I went to see an ornithologist who's advised the Scottish Government on seabirds and fisheries, Bob Furness.
Changes in temperature have a huge impact on plankton, not only on the abundance of plankton, but on the composition of the species that are there.
Plankton are microscopic organisms at the bottom of the marine food chain. They're made up of two types, algae, known as phytoplankton, and tiny animals called zooplankton. As the sea temperature rises, the plant-based phytoplankton will bloom. But the sort of zooplankton which the fish like to eat are replaced by a much less nutritious warm water species.
Long-term monitoring of the plankton has shown that warming sea temperatures has resulted in about a 70% decline in the copepod, which is the favoured food of sand eels and young herring. So this is clearly a vital link in the system.
And it seems that warming seas are also bringing in new predators at the top of the food chain, like the mackerel.
It appears that mackerel are changing their migration patterns in association with changes in water temperature. So in recent years, they've been tending to go further north than they used to do in the past. Predatory fish feeding on small fish like sand eels change the food supply for seabirds. And my guess is that the mackerel predation impact is really quite an important part of the story.
The Alsay puffin hunters believe this too. And at Peterhead on the east coast of Scotland, there is evidence of a mackerel boom. The catch landed by Scottish boats in the last 15 years has nearly trebled. This boat has returned from the North Sea with 800 tons of mackerel. Catches on this scale are no longer unloaded by hand. Instead, they're pumped direct from the ship to the processing factory.
Well, just look at the number of fish that are here. Like columns of mackerel coming out of that.
In 2014, over 250,000 tons of mackerel were caught by British trawlers.
You look at this and you think, the competition this represents for sand eels. These are the rivals that the seabirds have got to compete with.
The impact of the mackerel story in Iceland could be even greater. Their annual catch has gone from next to nothing 15 years ago to over 160,000 tons today. But is it really possible that these shifts in the ocean regime are simply in line with natural fluctuations? I went to see the director of the Icelandic Marine Research Institute, Johan Sigurd Jonsson.
The trouble with the seabirds, I think it is quite evident that it can be linked to temperature changes in the temperature regime.
So can you say...
So how exactly what exactly has happened
is more difficult.
That's difficult. I mean, although the decline in the seabirds is taking place, that does not necessarily mean that it's an unhealthy ocean. It's just a variability in nature. So, I mean, in my view, I would take that point of view before concluding that there is something unhealthy going on.
So you have to accept failure of seabird populations as a natural event?
Yeah, in my view, it is a natural event. I think everything points to that direction.
Other people in Iceland thought the same, that sea temperature changes are a natural phenomenon. But elsewhere, not everyone agrees.
I think the idea that seabird population changes are all simply a result of natural cycles and that we'll return to the same point that we were at in the past is a very naive view. There are so many human impacts superimposed on these natural cycles that it's very unlikely that the populations that we end up with in the future will be the same as what we had in the past.
Ian Mitchell is from the body that advises the government on nature conservation. In 2000, he ran the last comprehensive census of British seabirds and has a picture of what the future might bring.
In terms of whether there's enough food around for them to eat, that depends on what happens. The one sort of hope is, even if our sea temperatures continue to warm like they are, and we lose species like the sand eel, which they feed on at the moment, we may get new warm water species in, like the anchovy, for instance. We'd expect the Shiant, because it's already quite far north, probably to retain northern species like the puffin. But as the UK warms over the next century, we may end up with Orkney and Shetland and the most northern tip of Scotland being the only places we can see certain species.
So in the future, it seems likely that the makeup of our seabird world will shift. Birds from the Mediterranean are already off the Cornish coast, chasing the sardines and anchovies attracted by warming seas. Less adaptable specialist shallow feeders like the kittiwake may continue to decline. Deep divers like the razorbills, guillemots and puffins will probably cope better. One thing, though, seems increasingly certain. The world in which the seabirds live is changing. There is a resident on the Shiants that clearly shows how man has already had an impact on ocean life: the fulmar. The best flyer on the islands, it first appeared here in the early 20th century. When I came here as a boy in the 60s, the fulmar population was doing well, both here and throughout the North Atlantic.
And the fascinating thing about the fulmar is that it's almost the only bird that has thrived because of what people have done to the sea. That with the growth of industrial fishing in the early 20th century, they boomed, feeding on the offal and all the discards.
When quotas were introduced in the 1970s, fishermen were forced to dump thousands of tons of disallowed catch into the sea. And on the back of that, in the 90s, fulmar numbers peaked. But as industrialised fishing has shrunk and discard bans have come into effect, the fulmar population has gone into decline. But the fulmar's not the only bird whose fortunes have depended on what man has done to the sea. The great skua first arrived here during the boom 30 years ago, and is also now struggling to survive. Nesting on the ground away from the shore, I've always admired its utter fearlessness in defence of its territory. The bird is a brilliant opportunist, a pirate of the skies, getting its food however it can. This footage shows typical skua behaviour, harassing a gannet in flight until it drops its prey. But as the crisis has taken hold, the skua has started preying increasingly on other seabirds. In one colony, a few hundred pairs recently killed tens of thousands of smaller birds like the kittiwake during a single season. But perhaps the clearest vision of a future seabird world can be glimpsed on a small island just a mile off the east coast of Scotland.
That is a wow.
Bass Rock has been home to noblemen, prisoners and sheep. But now it's entirely colonised by a single seabird. 150,000 of them.
Look at that, look at that. It's just a universe of birds.
It's the biggest colony of northern gannets in the world.
Well, I've never seen anything like it in my life.
The gannet population here has increased dramatically throughout the 20th century, and in the last 10 years has more than doubled.
I've never seen anything like that. I've never, ever seen anything so enveloping. You know, it's not that you're coming to see a bit of nature over there, it's just like you're embedded in the whole thing.
With a wingspan of up to 6 feet, this spectacular creature is the largest seabird in the British Isles. They come here every spring after wintering in the Mediterranean and off the west coast of Africa.
Gannets are incredibly successful animals. They can travel huge distances in fishing trips, 300-400 miles out from here. They can dive shallow, they can dive relatively deep, they can take little prey, they can take big prey, so they are the great generalists that anything that the world throws at them, they can take advantage of, and this is the result. You know, total abundance.
In sharp contrast, when I was in Orkney, I saw kittiwake colonies that used to be teeming with birds, now reduced to empty cliffs.
If you think of the kittiwake, which is really specialised, it can only take sand eels or fish very like that. It can't dive, it can't travel that far, but they're stuck in their niche. But these guys, their niche is the whole ocean. They don't have a niche, they have a world. A gannet boom may well be an expression of the very problem that kittiwakes are suffering from. Warm seas, big fish, lots of gannets. Warm seas, fewer little fish, fewer kittiwakes. I mean, it's terrible to say so, but maybe this is like a weed. I mean, that's a spooky idea, isn't it? That these beautiful things are themselves symptoms of a system wobbling into the future.
Is this really what the seabird world is going to be like? The gannets are undoubtedly spectacular, aggressive, wide-ranging, adaptable. But will we lose the wonderful variety of puffin and guillemot, razorbill and kittiwake, and be left with a kind of bird monoculture of big bruisers like gulls and gannets? On the Shants over the last 50 years, it seems I've lived through a period of dazzling prosperity for the birds. But now we're clearly into an era of deep change. Local extinction may become the new normal. And while we're doing all we can for our seabirds on land, the horror in my mind is that the warmer seas may have pushed the world they rely on too far. The people who lived on the Shants for thousands of years left a century ago, in a world that could no longer sustain them. I only hope the birds aren't going to follow.